Hi, everybody. My name is Buddy Gott. Welcome to today's episode of my Gotta Pop podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have with me someone that I know through her writing on medium.com and through her podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And that is my friend, Kerry Purvis. Welcome to the show, Kerry.
Thanks so much for having me, buddy. This is great.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I did mention a podcast, and you and your husband, Justin, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
Justin.
yeah, have a show. It's about the Muppets, and I've heard a couple episodes of this, and it's fantastic. I encourage people to check that out. I'm going to include a link here on, well, I say here on YouTube, but show is on YouTube, and it's also the audio version is all the fine places that host podcasts like Spotify, Apple, etc. But just to talk briefly about that, you had started that a while ago, right? I know you've been a lifelong fan, I guess, of the Muppets.
Oh yeah, yep. I've been a lifelong fan of the Muppets, and we started it in 2020, I think. So, with like a lot of people, we started a podcast during the pandemic because what else were we gonna do?
Yeah, a lot of podcasts started then.
Yeah. And originally it was going to be a Muppet Show watch along, or like not a watch along, but like a like just a recap of all the episodes.
Oh, okay.
And it actually turned out really good that we didn't do that because Disney Plus released the show shortly after that, and everyone was doing the recaps.
Yeah, I
So
did see other
yeah,
ones on there when I looked for your show.
yeah. So what we've done is we'll have a guest on, and they get to pick a Muppet, and we talk about our favorite moments with the Muppet and with that particular Muppet, and it's a lot of fun. We've been kind of on a hiatus lately, but we're hoping to pick it back up soon. And we've also had like special episodes where last year we reviewed the Wicked Witch of the West Sesame Street episode.
Oh, that's
Have you heard
fun.
about that at all?
No, I didn't hear about that, but that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, like I won't go too deep into it, but basically it's an episode where they aired it and kids were so afraid of it that they never aired it again.
Oh,
But
no.
but it leaked. It leaked on YouTube, so we watched it and talked about it, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. I gotta look for that on YouTube myself. That sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah, I can see why kids were scared. But it's a fun episode though.
Oh, that's great. And today, well, we were kind of talking back and forth about what to talk about on here because we know each other through Medium. You write all different kinds of things on medium.com, including some things about pop culture. You do some things for my plethora pop pub publication, really, buddy? Publication and, other things. And I know we're both music lovers, but also TV lovers, obviously. So we thought we'd talk about, something from the music world and from the TV world today. And a band that we both love a lot. And I was thrilled when I discovered that you were into them because you were posting things online, different songs that you love by this band, is the legendary Bee Gees. Have you been a fan of them for a long time?
No, actually I have. So I've always known who they were, but I and it wasn't that I didn't like them. I just wasn't really super familiar with them. And like within the last couple of months, I just started listening to more of their music, and I'm like, this is really good. And for a long time, I thought they just did disco, which is fine, but
Hmm.
I didn't really realize how versatile they were.
Yeah, it's kind of
So,
amazing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carrie.
oh no, it's okay. I do remember when they had the Vegas concert in '97 or '98. I think I remember them singing the New York mining disaster song, and I'm like, that's really good. I've always liked that song.
Yeah, me too. That was one of probably the first songs that I knew by them when I was a kid. I started listening to music when I was around 10 years old, so that would have been around 1976. And at that point, that song was kind of considered an oldie because that was on one of their
Yes.
first albums. And I remember being a kid, and I think at first I thought it might have been a Beatles song. There was maybe a slight similarities in their sound in the early days, with the harmonies, the great harmonies. But I always loved that. And you mentioned the One Night Only concert, and we'll talk more about that later on. But that is one of my. I know it was recorded. I think it was. I don't know if it was on HBO or somewhere. There was a video of it, or maybe a videotape. But I had the live CD, and it's one of my favorite live albums ever. It's just such an amazing mix of their music from going back to the 60s, but then 70s, 80s, and up till I think at that point they had just recently released the Still Waters album. So there were some songs from Still Waters on there, plus some of the songs that they had written for other people. You heard like a little medleys on there, and I think and then I know there's one you like too on there that is on one of Celine Dion's albums, right?
Mhm.
What
Yes.
song is that?
Immortality.
Immortality, yeah, and that's
And I knew
amazing.
that one a long time ago. That's a really good song.
Yeah, that is a really good song. And Well, like you had mentioned the disco years, and that's probably maybe what they're most famous for, their association with that whole. I mean, they and like other acts like Donna Summer and the Village People are probably the first artists that pop into a lot of people's minds when they think of the disco era, from like maybe the mid to late '70s to maybe just the very beginning of the '80s, before people there was this big anti-disco craze, and that kind of ruined I hate to say it ruined their careers, but it did to a large degree. There was a. Did you by any chance see? There was a couple years ago. There was a special about the Bee Gees on HBO. I can't remember the name of it now. Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, that was. I thought it was really good, and they go into that in there how there was this anti-disco movement. There were record burning parties, and unfortunately, it put a damper on the Bee Gees sales for their future albums. And well, we'll get more into like their later albums later on, but. Going back to the 70s, I mentioned Saturday Night Fever. They had so many hit songs that came off of that. You had Staying Alive, Night Fever, How Deep Is Your Love, and they even wrote songs on there. I think they write If I Can't Have You by Yvonne Ella. I'm not sure. They might have been involved in the production of that, but
So.
yeah, but there was just so much, and you said that you've kind of delved into maybe some of their lesser known things lately, and you've fallen in love with those. And anything in particular you want to mention from them?
Well, the last album they did was "This Is Where I Come In," "This Is Where I Came In," or "This Is Where I Come In," came in, I think.
Yeah,
And
I think it might be Cayman. I'm not sure.
yeah, I've really enjoyed that a lot, and it's interesting to listen to it because, like we were talking, you think of them as a disco group, but I listened to it. I'm like, this sounds very modern. If for
Hmm.
that time period, there were some songs. I'm like, this makes me think of Michelle Branch and like
Yeah.
different singers who were big then. And then This Is Where I Came In. It reminded me almost of a song from Fleetwood Mac's album that came out around the same time, and I don't remember the name of it. But yeah, I was just really struck by the album. I love this song "Deja Vu" and "Man in the Middle."
Oh yeah, those are
Julian
good.
Morris singing lead.
Yeah, and that's something I think as I was growing up, and maybe a lot of people thought mistakenly was that Barry was the lead singer, because you saw Barry featured prominently because not that the other guys weren't attractive guys in their own right, but Barry was sort of like the heartthrob of the Bee Gees, so he got
Oh yeah, I
focused.
mean that amazing hair.
Yeah, I was he's one of the reasons I first started growing beards, because Barry had the cool beard back then. Him and Michael McDonald, I blame them for my beards. Um, but but yeah, I always thought that Barry sang the songs, and as I really because of things like Spotify, where I was able to delve more into their non-hits, I discovered that Robin sang a lot, and Morris to a much lesser degree. I think it was more so on like the last few albums that they did that he was
Yeah.
featured
Mhm.
prominently. Like that song you mentioned, "Man in the Mirror," that's a great song. There's several great songs on that album. I didn't own that one, but I remember getting that from back. I used to get a lot of. You'll appreciate this because I know you're a librarian. I used to get a lot of CDs from the library,
Oh
and I
yeah, that's
remember.
awesome.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember getting that from there, and I liked it. But I never ended up buying my own copy. And up until we were talking about it just recently, I hadn't listened to it in, I don't know, at least 15 years. But there's so many good songs on there. And one I like a lot is Technicolor Dream. Do you like that?
Yes, yes, that's got an old Beatles feel to it. I love
It
that song.
does. It's got this light, peppy sound to it. And I was playing it in the car the other day, and my wife Lisa was with me, and she heard it, and she's just like, "What is this? This sounds like this would be like if you had a TV show, buddy. This would probably be the theme to it because it just sounds like, hey, it's
Yes,
the Buddy Got Show, and it's just this light, boppy thing, Technicolor Dream, and it's kind of I don't know. I don't want to say hokey in any way, but it's got a great nostalgic feel to it. I think
yes. Yeah,
it's
I
a
could just see someone singing that in a vaudeville show, maybe. It's really, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think it's definitely got that kind of vibe to it. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really good album. I like that a lot. And I was turned on. I never, I can say I've been a fan of them my whole music listening life because, like I said, I think I first discovered them when I was around 10 years old. That was the mid 70s. And Jive Talkin' had recently been a hit. And they I remember loving Nights on Broadway. That had recently been a hit for them. And then, of course, Saturday Night Fever happened. But I owned a couple of their greatest hits compilations. I never had delved into their studio albums at all until I got a copy of Still Waters. And that came out, I want to say,
97, I think.
yeah, I think it was '97, and I got that by mistake. week. I don't know if you ever belonged to any of the music clubs that used to be
Oh
popular.
yeah, BMG and Columbia House. Yes.
Exactly. I was a member of both of them, and I was notorious for not sending that card back in on time. If you and people who don't know what those services were, basically, you got an album a month, except you could send in this card that they sent you, saying you didn't want it, but they sent it to you like weeks before it was due. So I often forgot about it. So I would get a CD in the mail, and I got that one, and I figured, oh, what the heck? You could return it and pay for it, but I figured let me just keep this. I like the Bee Gees. Maybe there will be one or two songs on there I like, and I ended up loving it. It's such a good album. There weren't any like big like top 10 hits off of it, but there were some things that got played on adult contemporary radio, like the song "Alone" and "Closer Than Close" got some play there, and it was good stuff. And it was a mixture where I think you heard Morris a little bit more, you heard Robin a little bit more. And whenever I do the shows, sirens are in the background. I don't know if you can hear them right now, but that's what
And,
happens when you live within a mile of a hospital. So,
but I live near an airport, so you might hear a plane maybe.
oh, okay. So this will be, exciting to see what we hear throughout the show. But so yeah, I loved that album so much, and that led me to get the One Night Only album that we talked about. And I'll tell you, if you're a fan, folks, of the Bee Gees at all, whether it's their stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, or afterwards, that's a really good album worth checking out. Like I said, it was from, it's exactly what it said. It was One Night Only. I think it was from Las Vegas, wasn't it, Carrie?
Las Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so good. Their harmonies on there are amazing. There's even one, oh gosh, I can't remember what song it is right now, but they actually work in a song with their late brother Andy at that point. He
Yeah.
they put him up on a video screen there, and can't remember what song it was, but especially on Andy's earlier recordings, the brothers all worked together. Barry wrote a lot of them. Robin co-wrote a lot of Andy's hits, and they sang background on there. And I had heard too that shortly before Andy died, which I remember it was sometime in the late '80s. I can't remember what year. There had actually been talk of him joining up with his brothers to be a fourth member of the Bee Gees, and who knows what that would have brought. That could have saved the guy's life. But it's just so sad that he passed away as young as he did. I think he was just in his early 30s at the
He had
time, and
just turned 30.
yeah, that was heartbreaking. I remember
It
being
was. It was. I've watched some things about him too, and just he never really seemed to find his confidence, and he just didn't see how talented he was. Like I think everyone else could see it. He was brilliant, but he
really
just couldn't.
was.
It was really sad. The first time I remember seeing him was on Punky Brewster.
Oh wow, how about that?
Yeah, it was really he was in 2 episodes and Cherry had a crush on him and it was just really cute.
Was he playing himself in that? Do you remember? Or
He was in 2 episodes. In one, he played himself. He was the host of a beauty pageant for the girls. And then in the other one, he played Punky's piano teacher, and he was trying to make it big. And they went to a record. It was a scam basically. So it was this person
oh,
pretending to be a record producer just to get their money, and then Henry comes in and busts him, and it's really funny. But yeah, he played the piano teacher who wanted to make it big, and he was singing that song he sang with Olivia Newton-John.
oh yes, I know which one you
The
mean.
Wait, Am I Wasting My Time song. I love that song.
Yeah, yeah. At first I got the wrong song in my head. I was thinking Suddenly, but that's one she did with Cliff Richard, and that was another good song from back then. But yeah, Andy was so good. Like you said, he was so talented, and he had confidence issues, and unfortunately, he had a lot of times that leads to drug issues, and of course, that was a big part of his problems that he had. But yeah, so such a talented singer, songwriter, and he did some acting. I know he had done some work in theater, and he had hosted you probably don't remember this, but there was a popular show called Solid Gold that he was a host of for a while.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it, but I've seen clips of it, so I know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been interesting if that had happened, if he had ended up working with Barry, Morris, and Robin and the Bee Gees. I would have loved that.
Yeah,
And
me too.
boy, how about as far as like the disco hits? Do you have any particular standout favorites from there?
Well, Staying Alive's fun. Jive Talking, I love that song.
Yeah.
Is Too Much Heaven, is that a disco era one?
I think it would fall into that. I think that came on the album that came right after Saturday Night Fever, which was something that I will find in my notes and I'll bring up later on. But yeah, that's a great song. I like that a lot. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that that was on the same album Oh wait, Carrie, I've just about got it here. Uh, no, I don't. My notes aren't as good as I thought they were. If you go to print out, like, say, the Bee Gees entry on Wikipedia, you get like 20 pages, maybe when you're not expecting that. So I've got way too much stuff here.
They've got such a large body of work. I had no idea.
I didn't either, even though I
Yeah.
knew they'd been around since the 60s. I mean, just looking here, they had released 22 studio albums and 83 singles. And that's not even counting live albums and plus the soundtrack works that they did. Oh yeah, did 4 soundtrack albums and they have 15 compilation albums, 2 live albums, and like I said, 22 studio albums. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's more than so many other legendary bands. And one thing that I have been happy to see, maybe the past dozen or so years, probably a little longer than that, is that we mentioned earlier the backlash that was against their music because of the disco era. But I think over time they have been a lot of that has dissipated, and I think people really view them for the just groundbreaking act that they were. That
Mhm.
they wrote so many great songs. They recorded so many great songs. Wrote so many great songs for others, including "Islands in the Stream," which was popular for Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, and just so many great things. Yeah, "Too Much Heaven's" a great song. I don't know if I said it a second ago or if it was just in my head. Was the song "Tragedy"? That's one of
Okay.
my favorites. That's a great one. I've got that on. I'm not like the workout king, but I've got that on one of my workout playlists. That I love listening to that. It's a fun song.
Good workout song.
Yeah, it's a great workout. A lot of those are great workout songs. Jive Talk, and I was listening to that the other day. Was I was on the treadmill at the gym, and I God help the people around me because I know I was probably singing it a little bit, and that's not anything anybody should have to hear under any circumstances.
Oh, I used to work at a gym and I can tell you people sing all the time.
I know they do. I know they do. I know my wife says sometimes she's like, "Did you see me like dancing when I was on the elliptical?" I'm like, "It's okay, honey. Everybody kind of gets into it.
Everybody does it. It's okay.
We're all feeling the music." So so yeah, just there's with all those albums. I know before we were doing the show, I'm like, I want to listen to all their albums before we do this, and I barely scratched the surface. I got into I wanted to listen to more of their stuff, like the post Saturday Night Fever things, and I only got to a handful of them. But there were some really good albums in that period. I was listening to one. Oh, Spirits Having Flown. Yeah, that was the one that I think had Too Much Heaven on it. But there's one that came out in 81 called Living Eyes that was good. ESP came out in 87. I mean,
Yeah, I really like that one.
that is really good. And then one I remember getting a lot of acclaim at the time was the album One, which had a hit single on it called One, which was really their first hit since of the that came out in '89. They really hadn't had any like they had hit the adult contemporary chart sometimes, but that was their first like massive big hit in almost a decade. And High Civilization, Size Isn't Everything is one I was listening to the other day. That came out in '93. I had never heard that before, and it was it's neat for me to go through and see what other people think in like reviews on Amazon.com and places like that. And people absolutely love that album, and I honestly didn't even remember when it came out. I don't remember any of the songs being played on the radio, but it actually had more of it's hard to say it's a rock sound for them, but there was a lot more. It was a lot of the songs were more guitar driven than some of the other things that were more like keyboards and dance oriented. And gosh, just so much good music. And I could probably I don't know, just spend months and months diving into this and not being bored at all. They're just
Yeah,
such a talented act.
so talented. Yeah, definitely not getting bored. So talented. And it's the documentary you mentioned on HBO, that was so good. And just hearing about their lives is so interesting too. And I didn't realize that Morris and Robin were twins.
I
And,
didn't either because
uh,
looking at them, it's not something you noticeably see.
no, I mean, Morris and Barry look very alike, and Andy looked like them too.
I
But
think so
but
too.
Robin, he looks more like his mother. So yeah, I never would have guessed. But yeah, they were twins.
That's really something. And
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear. I don't know if you've delved into this, but I saw that Robin. I had discovered it in that special that we've been talking about. But I didn't know that Robin had temporarily left the group for a while. There had been like I think there had been some going back and forth between him and Barry as to who would you know whose music should be focused more on the albums. And Robin went solo for a little while, and Barry and Morris recorded one album I think called Cucumber Castle. Have you
Yeah,
heard that?
I know I remember the name, but I haven't heard it
Yeah,
yet.
I haven't heard it yet either. I mean, the name is is pretty memorable, but I'd like to check that out and check out some of their solo things too. I know that Robin had recorded some solo music, even I think shortly before he passed away. And
Yeah, I think so. He did something with his son. I think it had to do with Titanic. I don't remember what
oh, how about
exactly.
that?
Yeah.
And I know there's one solo song by Robin from the '70s that you were probably familiar with that he did in terms of Sesame Street. He had done "Trash," which was on. Have you ever heard
Oh,
of that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. There was an album that came out shortly after Saturday Night Fever was popular that the Sesame Street characters did. It was disco, and it was called Sesame Street Fever instead of Saturday Night Fever. And there was a song on there called Trash that Robin sang on. And I think there was a version that might have been shown on the show where you saw him like singing with multiple Muppets. But when
Mhm.
what came out on the recording and what got played on the radio, Simon, I know this was my next door neighbor had the 45 of it, was just Robin singing. And it's just this fun little disco song. I guess an homage to Oscar the Grouch, since he
Yes.
loves trash, and it's a fun tune. If people haven't heard it, I encourage them to check that out. And something else that became popular in the '70s is a TV show that we both love, and that's I don't know if that's the best segue in the world, but I'm doing it. And that is a show called Barney Miller. That was a popular show in the. It ran for 8 seasons. It was on ABC. I think it started in '75, somewhere around there. 70,
Maybe, yeah, 75, 76. Yeah.
75, 76, somewhere there. And what I love seeing is that the show, it's been off the air for probably close to 40 years. I think it ended in 82 or 83, somewhere around there. And it has developed this new following. I saw several people in the past year talking about falling in love with it because they had discovered it on Amazon Prime, which it's no longer on. I was looking for it on there, but people had watched the entire series on there. And now it's on other places like, I think it's Tubi is on
On
there.
Tubi, yeah. The seasons 3 and 4 are on there now. For a while, it was seasons 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 came on. So maybe 5 and 6 are coming. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so. And you had told me you and your husband kind of fell in love with it from there, right? You were watching it on Tubi from the beginning, from the first season.
Yeah, yeah. So I do remember. I was born in late 1979, and the Barney Miller theme song is one of my earliest memories. I don't remember watching the show,
Hmm.
but I remember my parents turning on the TV and like the opening shot of New York and the bass line,
Oh,
and
it's so good.
I loved it so much. And yeah, I really remember that. And I don't think I even knew what the show was. I just knew I liked it. And then I became reacquainted with it, and Justin and I have been having a lot of fun watching it. It's so good. And have you seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Yes, I have. Yes.
They said there was some inspiration from Barney Miller for that show.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. That's a show I didn't get into. I hadn't seen till it was almost all the way over, but then I binge watched that and I ended up loving it. That's a really funny show.
Funny.
A
Yeah,
little bit
Justin
different
and
than
I were,
Barney, but yeah, I can definitely see
yeah.
where the inspiration could have come from.
Well, Levitt, he reminds me a little bit of Charles Boyle.
Oh yes, I can
I
see
didn't catch it
that.
until last night, but they sound kind of similar, and they have similar mannerisms.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah, I can totally see that now that you say that. Yeah, and Levitt's well, I was going to say Levitt's a great character, and it's true. There's that show is just full of great characters
it is, yeah.
right from the beginning, and it went through like a lot of shows, long-lasting shows. It went through its changes. Now you really, I can speak English. I really can, Carrie. It's not all going to be.
All good. It's all good.
But so you would watch it from the beginning, from the first season, and my phone's a little louder than it should be. But the show had transitioned a little bit from within the first couple of seasons. Initially, it started off more. Well, actually, the working title of it really originally was going to be The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, where you're going to see more of his family life, and you saw that a little bit towards the beginning. But it wasn't long before the producers phased that out, and because you would see scenes of Barney, most of the episodes where they did have his wife or maybe his children in it as well, were very very brief within the episodes. You saw like a little shot in his home, but then most of the episodes took place in the 12th precinct squad room, and it wasn't long before the family was pretty much, pushed out of the show, and every episode was just strictly in the squad room. Occasionally there'd be some things that took place out of there, but probably like 99% was in the squad room, and that seemed to work, I think, for everybody. How did you like the earlier ones with his family? Did you?
Right. I mean, I liked it. I think I feel like it wasn't really necessary for the story. Like I'm
Mhm.
glad they did it. It was cool to see his wife. And then in the later seasons they were having some marital problems. So it was interesting to see the how he dealt with that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they had it. I feel like it wasn't needed in the show, but it was a cool addition in the beginning.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think, like a lot of shows, I think they were just simply trying to find their way. Also, I had uh, I had actually shared with Kerry earlier today. I found I had never seen it before. There were two pilots done for the show initially, and one ended up being the one that was aired as the first episode. But there was an earlier one with almost a completely different cast, and even the opening credits of that were quite interesting because you saw pictures that were they were obviously doctored, but it was supposed to be Barney as a younger man, like with darker hair, like just in his police uniform, and him when he first got married, picture of his wife pregnant, and there was definitely, I guess, originally thoughts to focus it, on both his family life and in his police work, but it ended up being mostly about the police work, and I enjoyed those, seeing the family too. But like you said, it may not have been necessary, and then especially after we met all these other great characters,
Yeah,
and there were
I agree.
yeah, so many great characters on there, and the first season in particular, you had a couple that were only there for a little while. I liked Chano quite a
I
bit.
love Tano. He's so cool. Yeah, loved him. And Gregory Sierra just did a great job with him. I really liked him.
He did, and he was only, I think, did he maybe the first two seasons, or maybe I can't remember if we got it into the third or not. Excuse me.
Yeah, I wish they had he had stayed. I think he Gregory Sierra got another show and then it didn't work out with that show. So
Hmm.
kind of a bummer. He was a really good addition. Do you remember the last episode of season one?
Is that where he had to pull his gun on someone or something? There
Yeah,
was something along those lines. It's been a little
yeah.
while since I've seen it, but I remember it would being it was good because that one, I know, I think, went out of the squad room a little bit, and but I remember it being kind of heartfelt. It was his struggles with having done that. Am I off there, or
Oh
did
no,
he?
you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a bank robbery and he wound up having to shoot two of the robbers and he killed them. He was really upset.
Oh,
And
okay. I forgot that he actually killed a couple of
he did,
the.
yeah. And then so they had a scene with him at home and like just getting really sad and crying. It's like, wow, like that's in the 1970s to see a man crying on TV. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal, and
Yeah.
that was one thing. Well, one of many big deals on that show. Barney Miller was actually very groundbreaking. They had a couple of recurring characters on there that was a homosexual
Mhm.
couple too. And gosh, I'm drawing Marty, and I can't remember his boyfriend's name now.
Now it'll go Daryl or
I
something like
think that might be it's something like that. But they were really, I don't know. I think a great example of homosexual characters who were not just there for jokes. Yes, there were comedic moments around them, and especially in the reactions of some of the police officers in the squadron to them. Like for example, good old Stanley Wojciechowicz. He at first wasn't sure how to
that.
act around them, but then he grew to respect them because those guys were in multiple episodes. They were probably one of the most frequent recurring groups of characters that were on there. There were several occurring characters over the years on there, but those guys were great. That was quite groundbreaking, and plus, just the diversity in the cast members that you had there that were working in the 12th precinct. Like you said, we had Chano, who I believe was Puerto Rican. Uh, you had Nick Yamana of Asian descent, and you had Philip
There.
Fish, who was older
Oh,
man.
yep.
Yeah, Ron Harris, African American, and did
And
I get?
Barney's Jewish.
Yeah, Barney's Jewish, and
I
it's
didn't
just
mention that until later, but yeah, he's Jewish. So that
yeah,
was
and
nice.
I'd forgotten that too. So you had this really diverse cast of characters, and oh boy, they were also very unique too, and it led to such great comedy, and in some moments, great drama too. You saw the characters going through various difficulties in their own lives. You know, Fish was this age. I don't know how old Fish was supposed to be, but that actor Abe Vigoda always looked old. No offense to the late Abe Vigoda, but he always seemed to play older than he probably was. He was probably in his like mid to late 50s when he did that,
Yeah.
but he was a great character. And then, of course, well, we talked about Nick Yamana, who was played by Jack Sue. And recently, you and I talked about what ended up being really got just this very, very touching tribute that was done to him. For those who don't know, Jack Sue had passed away while the series was still being filmed. I believe it was maybe midway through after the third season, third or fourth season, I think,
I think
maybe
actually
later.
good season.
Yeah, but it was one of the first instances that I recall where a tribute episode was done in a sitcom to a cast member who had passed away. I remember watching it when it first aired, and I remember being devastated. This was a one of those rare shows that, as a child, I watched with my family, where we all really appreciated it. Like I remember my parents loved it, and at that point they were probably in their, I don't know, maybe early 40s or something like that. But here I am, like this kid watching it too, and I got a kick out of the characters, and they got a kick out of the maybe the jokes that I didn't even understand at that time. But it was just this good quality show, such great writing on there. And yeah, Jack Sue had unfortunately passed away of cancer, and they did this great episode where they showed a lot of nice clips, and you saw the actors talking about him, and very, very moving. It was a good episode.
Yeah, I agree, very moving, and, I'm sorry, I keep getting hair on my face.
No, that's okay.
So, yeah, it was very moving, and I liked how they handled that. In a lot of shows, they'll try to just write the character out, and sometimes the way they do it, it's just very haphazard. It's like, "Okay, that's random." But with this, they, they talked about, Jack, and they talked about Nick's greatest moments, and so they did it in a way that, it wasn't a weird write out. It was a real tribute, and it was really nice to see. And then I loved at the end of the episode how they all held up their coffee mugs
Oh,
for
I
Nick.
know.
It
Yeah.
was
Oh my God, you're like that just like hit me there. You know, that was I cry over everything, but yeah, that I mean that was very, very moving. And we mentioned Fish before. Fish was played by Abe Vigoda, who had done many movies even before he had been on Barney Miller. He was in I think the first two, or at least the first Godfather movie. I can't remember if he was in the second one or not, but several other things. And his character had left the show fairly early on, or at least midway through, because he had been so popular. ABC decided to spin him off into his own series, which was called Fish. Had you ever seen that, Carrie?
We watched the pilot episode. It was on Crackle, and then it like left Crackle. It was okay.
Yeah.
I liked the concept, but I think I liked him better on Barney Miller. But
Yeah, I liked him better. I think most people, and for those who don't know, Fish was a very short-lived show. I think it lasted maybe 2 seasons. I don't even know if it was 2 full seasons. They had tried to incorporate. I just watched one of the season 3 or 4 episodes the other day, where you were seeing what was going to happen to Fish in his spin-off series. Because basically, Fish retired from being a police officer, and he and his wife became foster parents to a degree for these troubled kids. And you saw one of the kids introduced in an episode of Barney. It might even be more than that, but it was, like you said, it was fine. It was okay, but I think Fish was probably a better supporting character than a lead character, and maybe just the show wasn't as funny or well written as it could have been too.
yeah, I think he worked better with adult characters than kid characters too. Just
Yeah, I think
the way
so.
Fish was. I don't know, like if he'd been another character, if maybe he would have been able to pull it off. But just seeing him bounce off the other characters on Barney Miller, he was just hilarious, and his comedic timing was amazing.
Oh, it was. He would just make a face. You would hear there was a running joke where Fish, because he was older, he spent a lot of time in the bathroom, and you would just hear people like mention a bathroom, and then he would just make a face, and then you would see him walk away. And he was just such a talented actor, and he went on to appear in many movies, even like the first Look Who's Talking movie.
I
I
remember
think
that.
yeah, he
Hmm.
was. I think John Travolta's grandfather or some relative in that, and it was good to see him then because I always loved him as Fish. And gosh, just so many great characters in there. Hal Linton played Barney Miller. I don't know if I had mentioned that earlier, but he had had a lot of Broadway experience prior to that. I don't know how much he had been on TV and movies
Not
before
too
Barney
much for
Miller.
TV, I don't think.
Yeah. But what I love is he now is in his 90s, and I still see him acting some from time to time. He still does things. I recently saw him, I think it was just within the past 2 years, on an episode of Grey's Anatomy.
Oh,
And I'm,
cool.
yeah. So I'm like, Hal Linden is still gigging. And I know he goes around now to conventions and he'll like meet the public. He and Max Gale, who played Wojo on the show, were just at something just this past week where I saw pictures of them together, and it's great because these guys. I see Max Gale's actually pretty active on Facebook. He'll answer people's questions about the show, and one thing that I've seen many times from the different cast members is that they have said that they're approached a lot by former police officers or even active police officers who tell them that Barney Miller was probably their favorite police television show ever because to them it seemed the most realistic. It
Hmm.
wasn't a case where these guys were running around pulling their guns every episode and getting into these great shootouts and dramatic situations. They were with in terms of like the interactions that they had with each other. They said that they felt it was very realistic, and I can see that.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, which that's another reason I love the show is because it is does have a realistic feel to it, I think. And it just shows kind of the day to day. It's not them going out in the streets and all the time, which would be fine, for some shows, but I just like the way it's very character driven, I think, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. And I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but it was so very true with the show is that there were such great characters. One of my favorites, especially when I was a kid, was Harris. We mentioned Ron Harris, and he was just so cool. He was always like the king of cool on there. And I remember, now I hate to say this now, but one of the things that I liked about Harris was I think towards the end of the show, I was like 13 or 14, and that's when I started smoking cigarettes. And I remember Harris smoked a lot on the show, and I just thought that was so cool. I figured, I could smoke. Harris is smoke. Not that I'm blaming Harris for that, but he was a character that you saw just, I don't know, he just did his own thing. One thing that I liked though more than the smoking thing was the fact that Harris was a writer.
Hmm.
Harris wanted to. In fact, I wouldn't say wanted to write a book, but he did write. His character did write a book. Excuse me, sorry, everybody. Allergy season. Fun, fun. But he wrote a book called Blood on the Badge. Have you gotten to any of those episodes, Carrie?
I,
Or have you?
I I just got to the episode where he was about to publish it and he was getting everyone to sign a release and Dietrich wouldn't sign it.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's right.
Barney was kind of hesitant, but Dietrich just didn't want to. And then Harris finally had to say, "Look, like your character's one of the best ones. I need you in this book."
Yeah, it was good stuff. I loved that because even at that point as a kid, I had feeling that I wanted to be a writer, and you saw this writer on TV, and again, the guy, he always wore like the fancy suits, and it was funny. There was an episode where sometimes you would see the officers on there go undercover, and like I think they were trying to crack like a prostitution ring, and or there was a mugger who had been going after women or prostitutes. Gosh, I'm probably getting this wrong, but I haven't seen this in many years. But the male police officers had to dress as women. Have you ever seen any of those episodes?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember when Harris had to do that and he had to shave his mustache off and he was really upset because he loved his
It was
mustache.
hilarious. That's where I was going with that because he had like he was very very particular about the way he looked. He had the expensive suits. He was always combing his mustache or like just checking himself out, and yeah, that was funny. And then I remember everyone was blown away with how because he did that. He dressed extra fancy. You would see Wojo and the others wear like off the rack kind of cheap dresses, but he got like the fanciest thing, and it was really funny.
Hmm.
And
Do you remember the werewolf episode where he it was so funny where they found this person who was a werewolf who said he was a werewolf. They found him in the park and he wound up having to like wrestle him down and he came in and he's just covered in mud and he's so upset that his suit is ruined. So fun.
I actually just I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The whole episode's hilarious. Like when you hear the wolf person howling downstairs and Jack Sue says, "Oh, I better put some more papers down in the cage." Like, I just
That was so good. I just saw that. I rewatched it just maybe 2 weeks ago. That was a classic one. And that actor, I'm drawing a blank on his name now, who played the character who thought he was a werewolf. He appeared on there multiple times in different roles. I think he might have returned as that character once, but I know he played other characters as well. And they did that frequently on that show. You would if they had an actor or actress they liked, you might see them pop up again as a different character. And oh yeah, that was so funny. I loved Harris in that, and yeah, Jack Sue's character Nick Yamana. He would just have such great lines and such this great deadpan delivery. And to this day, whenever I hear people talk about bad coffee, I think of him because his character, people, he made the coffee there in the squad, and people just hated it. They absolutely hated it. They gave him hell over it all the time,
Yep.
and it was
But then
just
it would be gone, and they'd be like, "Nick, coffee's gone." So
yeah. And one of the recurring characters on there that I didn't really, for some reason, I disliked him when I was a kid, but I've grown to appreciate him a lot over the years. Was Inspector Luger? He was, I guess, an old friend of Barney's. I don't know. He was a, they had worked together years before, but he would always pop in to see the boys of the old one too, and he could be sometimes annoying, but he was like this almost fatherly figure, but he would say some pretty wacky things once in a while. I remember there was an episode recently. You probably saw this. It was Quarantine, where
yes.
they got quarantined there in the squad room. They had a big warning sign outside of the squad saying "Don't come in here." And Luger saw it. He walks in with the sign. He's like, "Hey, what kind of joke is this?" Then he got stuck in there. And you had the gay characters that we mentioned, Marty, and I wish I could remember the other one's name. And seeing his reactions to them too was hilarious, but then he also kind of grew to respect them. It was a show where you might have characters who were gay or a minority or I'm using air quotes here, different in some sort of way than was normally seen back in the 70s and early 80s on TV. But they were done with respect. They weren't trying to make them into jokes. There might be some humor associated with them, but there was always a great respect there. There was good quality writing on that show.
Yeah, very good quality. I agree. Yeah, that quarantine episode is great, and it's very timely.
Yeah, it is, isn't
How
it?
Wojo was like, "Can't we just wash and go home?" And Marty's like, "No." And then with Nick in that episode, where Marty's husband or partner, I think it was Daryl, maybe
Yeah, I think it is Daryl.
he made coffee for them, and Nick said, these cups are white," and he's like, "Yeah, I scrubbed all the mold off of them." Nick goes, "Oh, I thought it was a pattern."
That was great. That was great. And you had mentioned Dietrich. He was a character. Oh, excuse me. That had come into the show like midway through. He was introduced in season 3. I don't know if the producers already knew that the Fish was going to be leaving, and they brought him in to maybe have him be a replacement. But Arthur Dietrich was quite a character too. He was somewhat of a I wanted to use the phrase know-it-all. I don't know if that would necessarily apply because he wasn't egocentric or anything, but Dietrich knew a lot about a lot of things. He had a great delivery too. Steve Landesberg was the actor who played Dietrich, and I liked him a lot.
I've kind of wondered if maybe I think he might have been a neurodivergent character, maybe on the spectrum.
I can see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I kind of get that feel. But he just says the funniest. We just watched one episode where I don't remember everything that happened, but there was a character who was an arsonist who was lighting fires and stuff, and Barney had just gotten back with his wife, and he was going to move in with her again, and everyone's saying all these nice things like, "Oh, I want to say this, I'm so happy for you," and then Dietrich says, "Can I say something? There's a fire at the pier."
his delivery was so good. He was great. He was just this interesting character. And what I liked about him too is you didn't know an awful lot about him. And I know it later in the series it came out that I can't remember what the basis of that particular episode was, but Barney was trying to get through to Dietrich. He's like, he had brought up the fact that he had before he became a police officer, he had been studying to be a doctor. He had been a med student. At one point, he had wanted to be an actor. I think there was like 3 or 4 other things that Dietrich wanted to do. So like you said, I think there was more to Dietrich than maybe initially met the eye. And like you said, neurodiverse. Is that the correct way? Am I saying it wrong? Neurodiverse. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, he was a great character. And Levitt's another one too. It at first was a recurring character. He was, for those who don't know, he was a police officer that worked downstairs, but he wanted to be a detective. He wanted to be part of the group that was there with Barney and his gang. And you'd see him. Sometimes it would throw him because he would end up filling in up there as a detective. He wasn't a full grade detective, and he was a great character. And that actor Ron Kerry, I think that's how you say his name, Curry. Um, he was really good. He ended up being in a couple of Mel Brooks movies later on, like after Barney Miller, and great actor.
Yeah, really good. I remember him on the Hash episode. That's my favorite episode. It's just so funny. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, he came in to fill in because everybody was stoned, and, and Jack Sue was saying, "Can you spell cat? We need professionals here." And
Is that the episode? Now, I haven't seen that in a long time, but is that the one? I remember one time Jack Sue's character, didn't he say something like "mushy mushy" or
yeah,
something? That episode because he was
yeah,
high?
yeah,
Or...
because he was high as Wojo's current love interest had made brownies for him, and he didn't know that it had hash in it. So everybody ate it, them except for Barney. And Jack Stu, he's talking with this person they'd arrested, and he's like, "Oh, look, he dunked this in the milk and it gets all mushy. That's a fun word, mushy."
That's
And then he starts singing. He just,
oh my gosh, that's right.
yeah, yeah. Harris is stoned too, and he goes over to him. He says, "What's happening, baby?" And then, then he starts singing, and oh my god! And he was a good singer too. Like, he was in musicals. He was in Flower Drum Song.
Right.
So
Oh
yeah, it
yeah.
was really cool to see him just let loose and sing, sing all these ridiculous things, and
Oh, it's
yeah,
just such a great cast. And for those listening or watching to this, if you haven't ever experienced Barney Miller, I encourage you to look for it. Like Carrie had said, there are some seasons available right now on Tubi, which I love Tubi. I love old TV shows, and you can find a lot of great things on Tubi, and it's free, but you're gonna have to watch some commercials, but it's not too bad. But they can be found there, and hopefully they're gonna pick up the other seasons that they don't have right now, and I'm personally hoping, since I'm an Amazon Prime member, that they put the whole series back on Prime.
that'd be good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been getting the later seasons from my library, so that's also an option. Check your local
Oh,
library; they
yeah,
may have.
that's great. That's great. Good call. Good call. And I found some good DVD deals online too, but I'm just going to keep them to myself for now because I don't want people to buy them before I get a chance to. And yeah, I love that show. And well, it's been a lot of fun talk. It's great to find another fan of that show because the quality of the writing was so good. It sticks with you. We just talked about the episode. Is it called Hash? Is that the
Yeah.
or, yeah? I have not seen that probably since the 1980s, but I can remember the things that I brought up, and then you were saying things. I'm like, oh yeah, it was just so good. It's just such
Mhm.
good quality writing, and the some of the producers from that went on to other things, and some of the writers did. I think some had gone on to Night Court too, like later on in the 1980s. And did you ever see the final episode of Barney Miller, the final couple?
Not yet. I've seen clips from it.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, it's got I saw the final moment. I'm like, oh, I'll probably cry when I watch this. It was really, really sweet. And
It was really sweet.
how Dietrich was saying, and this is another reason I kind of wondered if he might be on the spectrum. He was talking about how, well, he made a joke about being raised by wolves, which is not, doesn't have to do with being on the spectrum, but he talked about how he always felt like he didn't fit in, and being in being in the squad, he felt like they made him feel like he fit, which was really sweet.
Yeah, that was really sweet. It was a good episode, and what I loved about it too was that I had mentioned earlier how it was rare to see like the tribute episode that we mentioned earlier that was done for Jack Sue after he passed. But that was the when the series ended in the early '80s. It was rare then that you saw concluding episodes a lot for a series. But it was such a well-respected series. It was still doing great in the ratings, and the producers said to ABC, we want to end this. We want to have a closing to the story for these characters. So they let them have, I think it was either a 2 or 3 part finale where something occurred which led the characters to all leave the 12th precinct, and it was really good. It was very touching, but it still had funny moments in there. I remember a particularly good scene with Wojo in that episode too, towards the end, and between him and Harris. But I don't want to say anything because you haven't seen it in its entirety. But really good stuff, people. So check that out, and check out those Bee Gees. It's all out there to.
Mhm.
It's all, and like I said, there's just I've loved them like my whole music listening life, and just seeing like these lists of page after page after page of their albums and singles. There's so much of it I don't know. There's so much more to them than just the maybe 10 hits you hear now on the classic streaming services or oldie stations. There's just so much good music there.
Yeah, so good. You know what I would have loved to see? I don't think this happened, but do you know Robin on the Muppets, the Kermit's little nephew?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Can you imagine if he and Robin Gibb had had a little cameo together? That would have been
Oh my
so
gosh,
cute.
how great would that have been?
I wish we'd seen that. Hal Linden was on the Muppet Show though,
Is that
so
right?
mhm,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, I can see that. Did he sing with that? Because I know he was actually a good singer. I've seen just recently I found I love YouTube because you can find everything on there. He had a variety special that he did probably at the height of Barney Miller where he was just on there singing tune after tune and dancing, and I'm like, "Wow, look at him." But I want to look for that Muppets episode. I bet that was fun.
Yeah, very fun. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, it was cool to see him on there, and he's very talented.
That's great. Yeah, and yeah, such a great cast. And some of the members of cast members of Barney Miller had gone on to do some other things. Hal Linden is, I think he started maybe two other very short-lived series, but a lot of guest appearances and things. Max Gale, um, Maxwell. I don't know if you knew this, but he was recently he had a recurring role on General Hospital, the popular soap opera,
Mhm.
and he I think might have even won an Emmy award for that. I hadn't seen him in anything for a while, and I didn't watch. I gotten I haven't watched General Hospital in years, but it was just so nice to see him still working, and people were. I think his character had Alzheimer's, so he really got to. I saw some clips of it, and his acting was just amazing in there. It's great to see this person that you've admired their work for decades and decades, and then still see them out there, you
Mhm.
know, doing their art and thriving at it. It's great to see. And we mentioned Harris many times. He was played by Ron Glass, and he went on to some big things too. He
Firefly.
Firefly. Were you a Firefly fan?
No, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say at this point no, but I'd like to watch it someday, especially now that I know he's on it because I love his voice. Like if
Oh, such a cool
that
voice.
alone would
Yeah,
got me interested.
yeah. He was. I like Firefly. Firefly was good. I'm not as like into it as a lot of people were, but he was fantastic on there. And he actually, I don't. One thing that I liked that he was in that was very short lived was there was a shortly after Barney Miller left the air, he starred in a remake of the Odd Couple TV series.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was short lived, but they decided to make the main characters African American, and he played Felix. Felix Unger, who was played by Tony Randall in the TV series, the kind of the snitty one, which you can kind of see that from how his character was on Barney Miller. And then the guy who played Oscar was Demond Wilson, who had been on Sanford and Son as Lamont, and it was short. It only lasted one season, but it was good. And I'm going way off of what we're talking about here, but that's okay. It's worth checking out. Some of that's on YouTube as well. So, Carrie, we covered some cool classic stuff here.
Good. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. And folks, you got to read Carrie's stuff. She writes a nice mixture of things on Medium.com. I mentioned pop culture, but then you write about something that well, you write about all kinds of things on there. One thing that I have enjoyed reading by you is we have something in common. I have ADHD, and I know you have written about that on there. And you know whether you have ADHD or not, look for Carrie on Medium.com and. Like I said, just a lot of very, very entertaining and really just good articles.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome, and I thank you for being on the show. I probably said that 10 times, but I'm very thankful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome and thank you. This has been fun.
Oh, great. And I hope all of you enjoy the show. And you can find me on medium.com as well. I write about pop culture. I'm trying to do some other things on there. Like I'm going to be delving more into poetry, which I haven't done in a long time, and some personal essays. And you can find me on medium.com or thebuddygot.com. And again, thanks for listening or watching, whichever one you're doing, and have a wonderful day. Take care, everybody.